Okay, hello. It's Mandy and Gareth from I Listen here. Today, the topic of our little session is called Staying the Distance, and it's all about looking after your emotional resilience during coronavirus.
Hello, everyone.
So, what we're going to cover today, today we really want to kind of dig into the sorts of emotions that we're all experiencing, or many of us are experiencing at the moment, at this particular time of disruption and all of the changes, and what that actually means for us. We're also going to check in with our responses and think about how we might support our well-being, how we might be able to maybe adjust those responses through this particular time of uncertainty. And we're going to look at and try and recognize unhelpful thoughts and behaviors that might creep in during this time because of all of the stresses that we're under. And we're also going to look at how we can put in place a plan to make some positive changes that will help develop and strengthen our emotional resilience at this really difficult time. So first of all, we want to think about the emotional responses that we are experiencing at the moment. So coronavirus is an unprecedented experience for the vast majority of people. It's brought about really rapid, swift change that we're all having to deal with. And although everybody's experience will be unique to them, there are lots of things that we share in terms of the emotional responses that we have to that uncertainty, things as human beings that we will experience because of the massive changes that we are having to deal with, such as home working, such as having to experience restrictions in terms of our exercise and our ability to get out and about, and the things that we ordinarily take for granted. So let's move on to the next slide and think about what that might look like. So Gareth, if I'm to ask you at the moment, what are your emotions kind of day to day? And I've got a list for you there. And those of you who are watching our video, you join in too. Just have a look down our list from A to G there and just pick out which of those emotions, and it might be one, it might be more than one, it might be, as G says there, all of the above. But what type of emotions are we experiencing at the moment?
I think that I'm pretty much in a good place at the moment. I feel quite supported by my colleagues around me, and yeah, I can see quite optimistic for the future. We've had to adapt different ways of doing our training and stuff, but it's been really challenging and exciting at times. So for me personally, I do feel optimistic and calm with things at present.
Yeah. And you know, that's great, and a lot of you might share that view as well, and you might have kind of worked through some of the other emotions, but some of you it might feel a little bit stormy still, so you might be experiencing some of the anger, some of the anxiety, you might be feeling a little bit sad on some days, you might feel overwhelmed with what you're feeling as well, and you might actually fluctuate between those emotions from day to day and even from hour to hour as you respond to new input, new stimulus, such as news, social media, experiences you have, conversations that you have with people around you, and things that you're having to contend with. So really, I would say none of those emotions are wrong. None of those emotions are kind of off the table, and there are probably more emotions beside the ones that we've listed here that you're experiencing on a regular basis. So if you are one of those people that are feeling overwhelmed, don't worry about that. I think being overwhelmed is a really natural response to have to a situation that is unprecedented. It's a situation that we have never experienced before, and we're being asked to live our lives in a totally different way, a way that we're not used to. So feeling overwhelmed or angry or anxious or sad, and on some days we might feel calm and optimistic, and then we might find the next day we move back again. So having that kind of, those kind of emotional responses are fine, they are normal. And you know, sometimes I would say if we are not experiencing any anger or any anxiety, we're never sad, we might kind of question, do we really fully understand the situation? I think it would be rare for us never to experience those emotions at the moment. It might just be glimpses every now and then, but to have those kind of emotions in our wheelhouse just now, that's fine, it's normal. So we should acknowledge that, and we should say, actually, it's okay that I feel overwhelmed at the moment. That's probably a normal response. It's a response that most people would experience at some point. Just moving on then. So let's examine for a moment why we're actually feeling that way. And we brought out here a model that a lot of you might be familiar with. Some of you might find this is new information to you. It's been around for a while. Abraham Maslow, back in 1943, described the different things that motivate us as human beings. And he basically said that we need to satisfy the basic needs, the things at the bottom of our pyramid there, before we can move up to the higher needs, which are just shown above the red line on our diagram there. So what we've done is, on this diagram, we've said that really all of the things below the red line are potentially under threat, or we might perceive that they're currently under threat. So starting out with the lowest level, so these are the things, the most basic needs that we need to satisfy ourselves to keep us going. What do you think, are any of those things under threat at the moment for us?
Well, absolutely. I think food, water, these are all things that we've got to take seriously at the moment because of the contamination. Even the air that we're going out. I had a conversation with someone earlier who was saying that they're feeling guilty about going outside because coming across other people. So even going out for a walk and getting some fresh air is something that's triggering something with us that we probably haven't had in our lifetime before. Clothing, yeah, that's absolutely something that we're going to be struggling with. We can't go into town and buy clothes like we used to. And reproduction, as a single person, I can say, yeah, that's definitely under threat.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, all of these really basic things, being able to breathe air that isn't, you know, full of the virus potentially when we're going out and about. Having adequate food, we know that there's certainly been a lot of panic buying initially. I think it's kind of slowed a little bit at the stage we're at now, but certainly people had that fear, that perception that the food supply might be under threat. And for us in the Isle of Man, it's one of those things, you know, we're always talking about, you know, making sure that the boat comes on a regular basis, because that brings the vast supply of our food to us. So making sure that we still have that supply going. So it's one of those questions that people are asking. So it created, you know, a need, and some people felt driven to sort of panic buy just to fill the shelves, make sure the cupboards and the fridge were stocked on a regular basis. But we certainly can't as easily at the moment nip to the shops when we run out of something. We're having to plan ahead in a way that we haven't before. So we might feel that that's under threat. And sleep as well, you know, something that we hear an awful lot about is people's sleep patterns are being disturbed because they're out of their usual routine. They might be worried, they might be feeling anxious about things, and getting a really good night's sleep we know is vital to our well-being. So we might feel that that's under threat. And even for some people, the ability to get out and earn a living, we know, is also under threat. So for some people, they might be furloughed, they might have even lost their jobs. So being able to provide for their family and to provide that sort of sense of a stable home and an environment where there's enough food on the table might be under threat. And you're right about the family safety as well. We're worried about perhaps elderly or vulnerable members of our family who, you know, might contract this terrible, terrible virus, and we know the toll that that can take. That all of these things are under threat. And even moving up to the next level, the interpersonal connections that we make are more difficult. They're being challenged in a way that we probably haven't, most of us, experienced before. So being able to see close family, we might be able to see the immediate people that live in our household, but other members of extended family, close friends, other important relationships, and even our colleagues at work, we can sort of have virtual conversations at the moment, but we can't have that sort of face-to-face contact. You can't give your mum a hug and those kind of things that we sort of take for granted that we can normally do. So all of those things at the moment we are feeling that are under threat. And these are the basic needs that we're saying, Abraham Maslow said, we need to be able to satisfy.
Absolutely.
So really, it's no.
I think with the interpersonal connection, I see that a very, very real thing is in all the sports groups that I was involved with, whether it be pool, hockey, football, it's all just stopped, and everybody's sort of a bit like, when are we going to be able to get back? Are we going to be in the right fitness level to be able to carry on what we're doing? So yeah, there's some real concerns there.
That's right, and it just extends not only, as you say, to our sort of closest relationships, but to those other really important networks, social groups, and so on that we belong to as well. They're all sort of being turned on their head slightly, all being, we're managing them perhaps in slightly different ways. It's certainly not the same as we ordinarily would see. So really, it's no wonder that we're feeling overwhelmed, that we're feeling anxious at times, or angry that this has happened and we're not able to carry on our lives as we ordinarily would. So all of those emotions are perfectly understandable given what we know as what we need as human beings, because we hate the fact that all of that is under threat. And the reactions, the emotional reactions we're seeing, are a response to that threat, that perceived threat, or that real threat. So just moving on then, what actually happens to us? So when we feel that threat, there are three basic responses. So Gareth, you can talk us through the fight, flight, freeze response, which some of you might have heard of before, and for some of you this might be new.
Yeah, this is instinctive responses that we have when we've got that threat level up. It harks back to early man, really, when we were all about survival. And what actually happens is chemicals are released from our adrenal glands at the lower part of our back, and it gets us ready for these responses. So depending on the danger, you'll be ready to either fight your way out of it, you flight, so you run away from the danger completely, or you freeze. Now there's two ways of saying freeze. Some say it's like a deer in a headlight where you just shut down. But there's studies being done all the time, and one recently has just come out to say that actually what that's doing is giving you time to comprehend which of the other two responses is best to do. But what we do know is that it is instinctive. It's going to happen straight away. And you can see on MRI scans that they do on, you can just Google it. It's really interesting to see these chemicals flooding up to our brain to get us prepared for these. Now, the two main chemicals that we use to prepare for this flight, fight, freeze response is cortisol and adrenaline. So adrenaline is, as you can imagine, is vital for doing all three of the things there. And cortisol, that's more of a masking agent. So if you're running away from danger, it's there to stop you stopping in your tracks. It's there to, if you get scratches, cuts, bruises, that you won't stop. You just carry on until the danger's out of the way. But it does have quite a negative impact. So in our brain, we have these things on the screen here. They're neurons, and it's how we pass information from one to another. It's how we process things. It's how we move our hands, how we think and how we behave, are all depending on these neurons. And we've got 86 billion of them in the brain, which is fascinating. But when we're under that flight, fight, freeze response, what happens is cortisol comes along and actually does some damage to our neurons. So what it does is it shrinks the long spindly things that you can see coming off the center. They're called axons and dendrites. And at the end of those, there's a little gap. It's called the synapse. And that's where the electric currents go across, is how we process things. When we're under that threat and the cortisol comes into our brain, they shrink. So the gap of the synapse becomes larger and the information doesn't get to the next neuron as it should do. And if you think the more things that we're under, the more danger that we face, the more and more chemicals being released into our brain and the more damage we're doing to these neurons. So although there's 86 billion of them, it could actually have quite a negative impact on us. It's a physical thing that's happening. The best wrap up of it I like to think of is if you have walked into a room and thought, what have I come in here for?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens to me all the time, especially at my age, Gareth.
Well, that's it. That's the information not passing on as it should do. So it's all the different stresses that we're facing is causing that. I mean, the good news is that the information will find another route. It'll go through another axon, another dendrite to another neuron and eventually get to the place where it should do. But it really explains the gaps in thoughts, gaps in memories, the problems that we have with our sleep. All these different things are physically happening to us as a result of that cortisol and the flight, fight, freeze response.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's explains the sort of fuzzy thinking we might experience when we're under pressure as well, that we might struggle to kind of gather our thoughts and think clearly. And ultimately, if we're under repeated stress, if we're getting this happening a lot, and in quick succession, experiencing lots of stressful things, then ultimately that can impact our mood, and we can start to suffer with low mood or the early stages of anxiety and so on. So it can do damage if we leave it untreated. But as it says there, the good news is the process absolutely is reversible.
Absolutely.
So a lot of this is down as well, the emotions that we are experiencing at the moment, and we're talking about taking some control back here, are sort of driven by the type of story that we tell ourselves, because we all do this, whether consciously or not. We all have a story that we're telling ourselves. So here we've got 4 options. What kind of story are you currently today telling yourself? Are you telling yourself, I'm a victim of what's happening with coronavirus? Or are you telling yourself, I'm a hero, I'm absolutely bossing this, I'm getting through coronavirus, no problem? Or are you saying, do you know what, I'm just about getting through this, I'm surviving? Or are you saying, actually, my story varies from day to day. So some days I might feel like a victim, and other days I'm a hero, and other days I'm just barely getting by. So Gareth, what about you? What do you think
I
at the
think,
moment today?
D, my story varies from day to day. To be honest, that would be a fair wrap up of it. I think I don't
Yeah,
I don't necessarily think of myself as a victim, although situationally, there's obviously it's restricted things that we can do, so it has made things more difficult for me. Am I a hero? No, absolutely. I'm not doing anything other than doing my job and trying to do the best of that, or be a good parent. That's just a
yeah.
natural thing that I want to be doing. And I am getting through this difficult time. I know, though, that this is only a temporary thing. So that's really in the back of my mind to know that, yeah, you know what, this might be a struggle, but there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and that's such a good positive attitude to take, isn't it? Have a think as well, you at home who are joining in with this, about what story you're telling yourself. Really have a think, question yourself, and perhaps even ask the people around you as well. What kind of story do they get from the things that you're saying, from your behaviors, from your habits, and the sort of things that you're doing right now? Does that come across as a victim? Are you kind of stuck in that negative spiral of telling those bad news stories, that everything is dark, everything is difficult, everything's a struggle? Or do you really think, do you know what, I'm going to be a hero throughout this? And some people do, some people are the people that kind of rise to the top and want to do something in a very proactive and positive way, and that's fine for them if that's helping them to get through there. Probably the vast majority of us are just about getting through, or perhaps our story varies from day to day, or even from minute to minute. Sometimes I feel like I'm being a bit of a hero and I'm doing great. Other times, maybe I am a bit of a victim, or I'm just about getting through.
Mm.
So the narrative that you tell yourself is absolutely influenced by the language that you choose to use. And the language that you choose to use also impacts your thinking, which impacts your behaviors. So, having the right kind of language and checking in with yourself to really understand what kind of language you're using all feeds into the narrative that you're telling yourself. So are you telling yourself a story where you're a victim, or are you telling a story where you're a hero, or you're just about getting through? So let's just examine that for a moment. So the kind of language, the positive language that you could use that could really support a story of, I'm getting through this, I'm going to get through, and there's light at the end of the tunnel, or even the hero story, if that's where you want to aim for, is the kind of language where you will be using lots of phrases like I am, I will, I can, I am. It's really quite assertive language, it's very constructive, and it's positive language as well. Whereas the type of language that you might use if you're feeling like you're in victim mode, if you're really struggling, are things like I have to, I don't get to, I can't, or I am unable. So
So
let's just have a look. Yeah.
I've just been looking at the examples you got there,
Mm-hmm.
and I must admit I'm probably guilty of doing a bit of both of it.
Yeah. I probably am too, Gareth. I'll be absolutely honest with you. It'd be rare for somebody to do all of one or the other. It probably is for most people going to be a bit of a mix of the two. But I think being conscious of the language that you're using can be a really big step to retaining a little bit of control over what you're doing, and having an awareness that using the positive language can positively impact your thinking, which positively impacts your behaviors and ultimately your well-being, your resilience as well.
So this is a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, I suppose. That's the way that they're saying it, to change the way you think will change the way you behave. Is that
completely
right?
Yeah, absolutely, completely true. And isn't it something that's really interesting that we don't always think about the language that we're using in that kind of depth, and we're not always aware of it ourselves. And sometimes it's really useful to get a bit of feedback from the people around us as to, do you catch me using these types of phrases? Let's just examine for a moment a couple of the examples in the victim column, if you like. Things like quarantine, social distancing, self-isolate, lockdown. What kind of images do you get from those kind of words, Gareth?
It's almost prison-like, isn't it? Like,
It
oh,
really is,
everything's
isn't
taken
it?
away from me. Yeah.
It is, isn't it? It's those kind of words automatically for us start firing off all of those fight, flight, freeze responses. We are responding to those things on a really basic level and thinking about, well, actually, my freedoms are being attacked. All of those things that I take for granted about those relationships and how important they are, and about some of our basic needs. I don't get to go to the shops or cafes anymore as and when I want. I've been used to being able to do that. So all of these things we might find ourselves falling into. Now we're hearing this kind of language on the news, in social media all of the time, and we're probably using some of it ourselves as well. Social distancing, self-isolate, quarantine, lockdown are all phrases that are just used all the time at the moment. So you can imagine every time we're hearing those kind of phrases, it sets off that kind of response in us. So we are starting to feel like we are a victim of something that's being done to us.
Yeah.
So let's turn that on its head a little bit. Alternatives to that. And this is maybe a slightly different way of thinking of things. And it certainly does take a bit of conscious effort. But instead of saying, I have to quarantine, why not try, I'm choosing to stay home because it's keeping me and my family safe. So automatically, by saying those words, we get a totally different response. So in our brain, that is something that we are choosing to do. It's a choice. It's something that we have a bit of control and some power over. It's not something that's being done to us. So I'm making that choice to stay at home because it keeps me and my family safe, the people around me, my society, and so on. And also things like when I go out, rather than saying I'm social distancing, I keep 2 meters apart when I leave home. Totally different, again, response that we would feel if we're choosing to use that particular phrase or something similar. So, I'm choosing to keep 2 meters apart because it keeps me and my family safe.
So what happens when you try to do something positive and it turns out negative? So for example, I can't go to the barbers, so I chose to cut my hair myself.
You chose to do that. It was within your power to do that. It's within your control to do that. But you
Started off
choose.
a positive thing.
And next time you might choose to get some help from somebody else.
Very true, very true.
Yeah, so we are on lockdown. It might be something like, I will get to see my friends again when this is over. So this is something positive. It's looking forward, it's future focused. So it's just really examining, and those are just a few examples there, but really thinking about the words and checking in with the words that you're using and thinking about what kind of story does that tell when I use that phrase. Is there an alternative phrase that I can use that has a more positive outlook? Because we know, as you say, from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that works. It really does change our thinking, and that changes our behavior and positively impacts our resilience and our mental well-being.
Also lifts our mood as well.
Yeah, absolutely it does. So definitely worth giving it a go. Like I say, get an ally in this. Think about somebody who you live with at the moment, or if you're self-isolating, if you're on your own, think about somebody that you're picking up with via social media, via the telephone, via video call, and just sort of check in with them and say, what kind of language do you hear me saying? So really what we choose to do in terms of the story we tell ourselves can either feed the beast and feed those base instincts, those flight, fright, freeze responses, and turn us back into that kind of early, very instinctual person with those responses that drive us and drive our behaviors, drive our mood and drive the outcomes. Or we can choose to feed the hero in us or aspire towards that and think about some positive changes that we can make. And that's not just to do with language, but it's to do with the habits that we develop as well. And that's things about social media, the amount of news consumption, the topics of conversation that we choose to have as well. So are we continually talking about coronavirus, about the negative aspects, or are we choosing to look out for some of the good news stories? Because we're seeing some wonderful things happen in the community where people are being really supportive of one another, where they're volunteering, where they're doing some fantastic things and raising money for charities and that type of thing. So the stories that we tell ourselves, the way that we behave, the habits that we adopt might feed the beast or they might feed the hero. So really think about the habits and things that we are doing day to day, as well as the language that we're using, and ask ourselves, am I really feeding those anxieties, those worries, that low mood? Or am I having a more positive outlook? Am I choosing to do and say things that have a much more positive outlook? Because we know that can impact our well-being. Okay, so far we've been talking about checking in with ourselves when it comes to things like the language that we use, the behaviours and habits that we're adopting. And part of this really kind of falls into the whole theory of emotional self-regulation. And what we're going to show you here is a model from Jay Gross back in 1998. And it's a really kind of simple model that breaks down exactly what's happening to us. So Gross said that we are presented with a situation. So take, for example, coronavirus at the moment, and that demands our attention. So we're being asked, coronavirus is happening, it's all pervasive, it's something that requires our attention. So then what happens once our attention is caught by this particular situation is we appraise that, we break it down and we think about it, we process what we mean, what it means for us. And that includes our instinctive responses as well. And then we formulate a response to that. So if we break down those steps in a very deliberate way, then what we're saying is at the appraisal stage, what we can actually do is check in with ourselves and think about, how am I responding to this? What's my thinking pattern doing at this point? And that will determine the response that we give. So just moving on, what does an emotional self-regulator actually look like, Gareth?
Flexible and adaptable. That's definitely something that I would see, and takes control when appropriate. Yeah, finds a way when things are going tough. That's also looks quite good. It'll keep them calm when they're upset to a degree, I suppose. Knows how to cheer them up when they're down. Yeah, that type of thing.
Yeah, it definitely is, isn't it? And that's because we've taken that pause to really assess what's happening and formulate a rational response to it. So we're kind of moving beyond our instinctive responses and taking that pause, taking that time to really evaluate what we're dealing with. So, okay, the air that we breathe, we might perceive that instinctively as a threat to us at the moment because of the virus. But if we take pause and we really think about it, there are things that we can do to limit that threat to ourselves. So having that flexibility and adaptability, as you picked up on, and being able to really assess in a very rational way what threat that actually poses to us and how we might minimize that, allows us to really sort of look at that as a challenge and think about, what can I do about that, and how can I give it my best? How can I deal with this situation and bounce back from it? Because that's what resilience is really all about. It's that kind of pause and thinking and assessing a situation and thinking about, okay, I might feel a little bit overwhelmed at the moment, but what can I do? What's within my power to to actually do to calm myself down. And if I'm feeling a bit down because of all the negative press and conversations that I might be having with family members that are very negative, for example, then what do I do to get myself out of that funk? How can I cheer myself up? So it's really sort of taking charge of what we're dealing with and the emotions that we're feeling in a really positive way. So that's what a self-regulator looks like. And that kind of person is able to develop that resilience. So these are absolutely things we can all learn to do. Yes, they require a bit of effort and a bit of practice, but it's something we can all learn to do. So other ways, we're starting to think now about other ways that we can strengthen our resilience. And we've got a few thoughts for you here on how you might do that and particular areas that you might focus on, because we're throwing at you lots of different things here. So starting off with building connections. Gareth, what kind of ways can we build connections at the moment?
Well, although it's become more difficult, absolutely, we can't go to networking events, we can't go to the usual things that we would get involved with, sporting and that type of thing. There are definitely still loads of resources available online. You only have to go on Facebook, and there's virtual taverns and all sorts of different things where we can still carry on that connection part.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of us are probably focusing on the connections, the existing connections that we have, and maintaining those. And that's definitely a positive thing to do. And building new connections at this time, we might feel a little bit as though life has been put on pause. But actually, one of the things that we talked about in the previous slide is looking at challenges and seeking out the opportunities created by those challenges. So, for example, you and I, Gareth, are actually forging new work connections all the time because of the opportunities that we've kind of created for ourselves and the adaptations that we've made to the way that we work. So it is possible to seek out those new connections. And that's a really forward thinking and a really positive thing to do. So as you said, whether it's in your work life or your social life, these online quizzes and all sorts of different things that you can get involved in. Tomorrow, for example, I'm dialing into an online mindfulness session through the UCM, something that I've never done through UCM before. So there are ways that you can forge new connections. So it's seeking out those opportunities and making the most of them.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about embracing healthy thoughts, as we've been talking with language, with viewing things in a slightly different way, really checking in with ourselves in terms of the habits and our thinking patterns. And it absolutely is something that we can choose to do. So it's really interesting that some people regard themselves as either negative or positive people, as though it's some sort of fixed trait, when in actual fact it's a habit that we develop over time. We're not born as either negative or positive. It's something that we learn. So it's absolutely something that we can unlearn if we feel that we're being caught in this kind of negative thinking pattern or way of doing things. So we can unlearn that. We can start to develop those healthy thoughts.
Absolutely. I heard something described the other day, which I thought was quite good. They're saying that low mood is often caused by worrying about things in the past, and worry is caused by things that are going to happen in the future. So to try and avoid those two things and embrace the healthy thoughts can make a huge amount of difference, especially.
And that's what, yeah, absolutely. And focusing on the present and what you're able to do today is such a healthy thing to do. Living in the moment, and mindfulness I just mentioned there is one of the ways that you might choose to do that, but there are lots of other things you can be doing as well. So building wellness is a really positive thing that we can do. Gareth, any kind of thoughts about how we might build our wellness at this time, when particularly at the moment our health might be under threat from coronavirus?
Absolutely. Well, the things that I concentrate on personally is to have that work-life balance. I think that's really important for me. I have children, so I make sure that I get my work done, obviously, but I also spend quality time with them when I have them. Even though there's restrictions on how much we can go out, we find lots of different ways. We're lucky enough to have horses up in the field next to us, so I've been able to take the kids up to go on the horses. We've been going out for walks together, playing football in the back garden, that type of thing. But it's not just about the exercise. I think it's the social connection that we have together is probably one of the most important things for me. and diet as well. It's suddenly really difficult. It used to be that I used to feed kids by sending one of the children to school, and their school dinners would be looked after, and the other one would pack lunch, so that would be a nice sandwich every day. But now I've got to really think about what I'm going to give them, 3 meals a day. So it is quite good, but it's also encouraging me to eat more healthily as well, because I'm thinking about them. I'm not just eating snack foods that I could possibly guilty of in the office, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I think we all are, aren't we? But you're absolutely right. It's actually taking charge of our wellness, of our health, thinking about our mental wellness and also our physical wellness at this time really feels like a positive thing to be able to do. So sometimes just kind of taking stock of what we're doing, of the habits that we've developed with things like our exercise and our diet. Now is a good time to maybe build some new habits, some healthier habits, because doing that is a really positive thing to do. And we know it strengthens our emotional resilience as well as our physical resilience. And finding purpose as well. We know that this is a positive thing to do. And it's something, again, sort of harking back to CBT, which we already talked about, is something that's so powerful that if we are struggling with a little bit of low mood or some worry, doing something really positive that gives us meaning, that makes us feel like we're valued, we're an important part of society, that we're needed, really, is such a positive thing to do. So what kind of things can we do to help us find purpose, Gareth?
Well, I think probably one of the first things that we've encountered ourselves is learning a new skill. So we're no longer able to do face-to-face training. So we've had to adapt. We've had to overcome barriers and see what else is out there. This session here being one of the things that we've put together, but it's using our skill sets and really trying to build on those things. Bounce back ability is one of those words that's used a lot, and I really do believe that, yeah, we could have either sat back and just thought, oh, everything's over, or we can look at this as a positive and say, right, let's take this opportunity to learn new skills, learn new ways of doing things. And yeah, we've been quite lucky, I think, and
Yeah.
have the support from our colleagues to be able to do that.
And a lot of people are having to adapt in the way that they do their jobs. And for some people, unfortunately, at the moment, it's just not possible to do the sort of work that they've been able to do in the past. And as we said before, some people have been furloughed, some people have been let go from their jobs completely. And for them, we always say that our jobs does give us a purpose. It gives us a goal. It gives us a reason to get up out of bed in the morning. So there are other things that we might be doing, and it might be learning a new skill that can prepare us ready for when we rejoin the workforce, or when life gets back to some sort of normality. So many sort of online learning courses and things that you can take up for free as well. Lots of things on offer locally and further afield as well. But it might also be about doing things for other people. So there's such a big call for volunteers and people who can help out at the moment. So if we haven't got paid work available to us, much as that is very important to everyone, if that's just not an option right now, find purpose in other ways. So whether that is, as I say, learning a new skill, or whether it's choosing to do something for other people, and that might be just helping out an elderly neighbour, for example, and doing some shopping for them, making sure that they're looked after, or looking after the people around you, whether that's children at home or other family members and people that share your household. So it's looking for ways that you can find a purpose, because we know that's a positive thing to have in our lives. So we talked about some of these already. So just to kind of reiterate, 3 things that we can absolutely have within our control, that we can take positive steps over. And if we do nothing else that we've talked about today, these are 3 things that I would absolutely encourage you to do something about. So why not set yourself a goal of doing something positive with regards to your diet, your exercise, and the social interaction that you have as well. Those are really positive things, and we know they support your well-being. We know that they support your resilience in tough times, as well as when times are going well.
I think it's really part of this process that's going on of learning new skills and stuff. It's even works for the older generation. For the social interaction part, it doesn't have to be face to face, does it? We have a family chat. Mandy's my sister.
Yeah.
And in that family chat is 4 generations of
Yeah.
our family. And we speak now more over FaceTime or whichever app that we're using than we ever have done before. And it's really good to
Yeah.
see what everything's going on, what people are doing, how people are handling things slightly different than each other. But yeah, there's definitely some good things, and it's not impossible to have that social interaction, is it?
Absolutely not. No, you're right. And since, whether it's using an app like House Party, which gives you, fun quizzes and games that you can play, or we even had a competition at Easter to decorate a hard-boiled egg that we all participated in. It's whatever floats your boat. There are different ways that you can get involved and, just harness that creative part of your brain and come up with different ways that you can keep connected with people. It's so vitally important, particularly when some people are on their own at the moment and away from other people. Such an important thing to do.
I was going to say that if you think about anybody that might possibly be new to the island, or again, somebody who might have just lost a loved one, these are definitely really important things that we should try and engage with, because you can see how diet, well, if you're on your own suddenly, it's the microwave meal for one, isn't it? If you're used to
Yeah.
somebody else cooking for you, that type thing. Or if you're new to the island, you don't know where resources are, you would just go for the ping food. Exercise,
Yeah.
it's so easy just to pull yourself away from everything and become almost a little bit isolated. And with that, your social interaction isn't there either.
Yeah, and so many of us kind of rely on team sports as a way of, ticking two of those boxes. Really, we get our exercise and we get our social interaction away, and as well, it's just not possible right now. So it's thinking about different ways you can do that. Lots of online classes, though, if which are not as good, but not a bad substitute, I think, for some of those things. So ask yourself, what are you doing for exercise? So I'm asking you all now to have a think for a moment about what you're currently doing for your exercise. And I'll start off with what I'm doing. So every morning I get up and have my breakfast, and then I fire up a really old Wii, Nintendo Wii, and I fire up the Wii Fit, and I do 20 minutes of exercise on the Wii Fit before I start my day. So that's a new habit that I've developed. It's not something that I was doing before. I did a long, long time ago, but I've started again. And every day I try and get out for a walk in the fresh air as well. So I'm trying to develop some healthy habits because I know it's good for my well-being. I know having a walk helps to kind of sort my head out at the end of the day. And I know it's building up my immunity, and it's doing some really healthy things for me physically too. So what about you, Gareth? What are you doing for your
Well,
exercise right now?
well, that's a new thing. I never knew that you did that. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. What I've been doing is since the coronavirus lockdown, to get the kids out, get them doing something. We've revisited Pokemon Go, which I don't know if you've ever played it, but you
Yeah.
have to get up and you have to walk around to get different treats, find different Pokemon, and try and catch them. And it's all done on the phones and stuff. So would I get the kids going out for a big walk? Probably not without a fight. Would they be mumbling, grumbling? Yeah. But with this app, we went for an 8-mile walk the other day, and they really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that's it. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's get a little bit creative, and you might start to develop habits that, are a change from your usual routine, but trying to build these things into your routines is such a positive thing to do, not only for you, but for your children, as Gareth said, for the other people around you. So I go out with my husband and my teenage daughter as well. So we all join in with the walk, and it's a really nice thing that we can do together. And some of these habits that we're developing now are things that we might continue to do once things get back to some sort of normality as well. So they're positive things that we're building into our routine now that we might well take forward, things that we might not have done before, or changes to the routine that we had before. Okay, so one of the things that we touched on briefly before is really turning some of these thoughts and ideas, like changing your language, building new habits and routines, changing the way that we choose to think and react, managing our emotions and self-regulating. All of these things are possibilities at the moment. And how do we turn a possibility into a reality? Well, we need to make a plan. So having a plan and really thinking through what it is that you want to change in a positive way that will improve your resilience and improve your overall well-being is something that you should absolutely spend some time on. So after the session, what we'd really recommend for you to do is to take these 3 steps. And they're really simple, easy things that you can do. And the first thing is to set some goals. So Gareth, any goals that you're going to set yourself?
Well, yeah, I really want to do workplace wise. I really want to learn a different way of presenting our knowledge. So we're going to do some e-learning courses, I think. So my goal is to try and research them, try and figure out how it's possible to do that, and hopefully be successful at the end of it.
Okay, so the goal that I probably want to work on is continuing to check in with my language, because as with probably everybody else, I'm guilty of still using phrases like lockdown and so on. So some of those phrases that we said are probably leaning towards the victim side of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's continuing to check in with that. And just as you and I have done here, Gareth, setting goals is the first step. And if you want to write them down, that's even more powerful, because it really forces you to think through and to put the goal down in a very concrete way. And then what we've just done is we've shared the goal. So by actually talking about it and sharing it with someone, and that might be a family member, a friend, it might be a colleague, a work colleague too, by sharing them, we're actually starting to change that into reality. We're committing to the goal and we're demonstrating that we're doing that. So sharing it as well as writing down, very powerful things. And then it's about moving that forward and actually trying it out, trying to change that habit and develop a new healthy habit. And it's checking in on your progress and maybe doing that with the person that you shared that goal with, just telling them a little bit about how you're getting on, or even asking them, how do they think you're getting on? Are they seeing some evidence that you're moving towards that goal as well?
Yeah,
So really, in a very deliberate way, plan your resilience strategy.
I think that's a really important part of the process, because I know even with my challenges that it's not going to be a quick thing. It's going to take a long time. So it could be often that these things that take a while and it takes investigating, that it goes off the boil a little bit. So to have someone to give you that kick up the backside is really important at times.
It is, that's it, just a friendly nudge, and maybe get them set some time aside to actually check in with each other. Perhaps they want to set a goal and it'll be a mutual, almost like a buddy sort of system that you set up, where you can check in with each other and, you know, nudge each other, give each other a little bit of encouragement to move towards that goal. Because those are the things that will really change it from just some thoughts and ideas into really concrete action. And that's what we want out of this. Okay, so we've done our sort of whistle-stop tour, and hopefully we've given you something to think about and something that you want to do, something you want to change, new habits you want to develop as a result of that. And we really did examine what our emotional responses are at the moment and why they're happening.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about checking in with our responses and really examining our thinking and our behaviors, the language that we use, and so on. We're recognizing when we're having unhelpful thoughts and how that impacts our behaviors too, and how that can ultimately impact things like our resilience and our mental well-being. And then finally, we've talked about putting some plans in place for making some really positive changes. And I hope you do take those forward, and the best of luck with that.
Absolutely. We touched on the negative chemicals that will have a physical impact on our brain and our way of our thinking. We also looked at some of the good chemicals as well, although it wasn't really mentioned that much. I think it's important to say that through that diet, exercise and social interaction, you really are boosting the good chemicals that will start to do some of that repair work, and that's dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. So you're actually doing something positive. And also, if you're not feeling bad at the moment, then that's absolutely fine. But by doing these natural things, this natural exercise, looking after your diet, you're actually going to be building up a resilience factor for when things do go bad. So that's a proven technique that you can take forward as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much. If you've got any questions, although this is not a live session here today, you can still get in touch with us. Just on the next slide, we've got our contact details. The best one to get a hold of us is training@ilisten.im. Of course, we're not able to do any fundraising at the moment, but in the future, if that's something you want to do for us, or you want to get involved in any way, being an ambassador, providing us with information or support, then reach out to us through getinvolved@ilisten.im.
Thank you for
Thanks,
being
everyone.
so patient. Stay
Bye.
safe.
Yeah, stay safe.